You'll notice today I'm sitting in a seat rather than a stool because we're rocking back and forth. And I don't want you to think as a drunk up there talking to you. Last time that we were talking, now let me start back. Let me tell you the story about this fishmonger in New York City. A hard, old, crusty woman. She wore a man's overcoat, had a scarf around her head, looked like some Eastern European refugee. A tough woman, fishmonger. She'd buy her fish from the fishermen early in the morning, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, resell them retail in the course of the day. About noon, if she hadn't sold the fish, she'd take them to some restaurants that she had lined up, sell them wholesale. She made money on every fish she sold. Tough. Rarely smiled. Wasn't friendly with the people on either side of the little stall. Tough woman. So it's surprising when that woman would be in the company of her grandson, because she changed personalities entirely. From this tough, old, gruff fishmonger to this wonderful, loving grandmother. And in fact, that was the highlight of her life, was spending time with her grandson. One Sunday afternoon, she went by, the fish market was closed. She went by and picked up her grandson. He put on a little coat, put a little hat on his head. They got on the train and went down to Coney Island. She laid out this blanket, and now that tough, mean, hard woman from the work week is gone, and it's this loving grandmother. And she laid Nathaniel on the middle of a blanket on the seashore, and she went to go get some seashells. When out beyond the breakers, this giant wave began to form. This is a true story. And it was coming in towards the coast, coming in towards shore, coming in. The breakers died down to nothing. The undertow pulled out until you had this monstrous wave coming in, almost as high as the pier. It got close to shore and it lapped down right on top of Nathaniel and dragged him out to sea. And the old woman was off some distance, and she came running back as fast as she could waddle. She got back to where Nathaniel had been, and it's calm again. No Nathaniel, just that old blanket, and sort of pulled out some to see. She looked up at the heavens and said, God, you cannot take that away from me. You cannot take that golden-haired little boy from me. You have to give me back that boy, God. You hear me, God? And there was a quiet. And then out behind the breakers, another wave formed. Now, this really is a true story. And coming in towards shore, you can see there was something on the top crest of this second big wave. And as it got in closer, you could see that it was a little boy. And the wave came in and stopped. And it deposited Nathaniel at her feet. And she reached down and picked him up. He's coughing. He was okay. She looked down there. A hat. He was wearing a hat. Tough woman. Yesterday we were talking, and I think I got I got off subject a little bit, talking about family. But we were talking about Brenda, my wife, the lady that had the badge of meaty colors, who was such a force back in headquarters. She would often be sent out on errands by the chief of security, and when she would walk into an office, people would stop talking when she would come in, because they sort of knew who she was. And when she asked to see somebody, they were always there. They were never in the meeting and please wait, and they would always come out. So she had some authority. Very rich woman we had at Langwood that I was married to. The disappointing thing for me, though, we'd be driving home at night, and she might say, you know, the daggone this thing happened. The most curious thing happened. I can't tell you. Wait a minute. But they got a good one when they got Brenda, and she would not tell me. She'd say, please don't divorce me. Don't put me out of the car here on the side of the road, but I just can't tell them. We had several jobs to do. Because of her badge of many colors, we were assigned to Africa. And we had different jobs to do. She had her 7 piles of things to collect. I had to get the passports, which I was not very successful at. And I had to get a car. My son and I, about 7 years old, he and I went out car shopping. Finally found a Pontiac we liked. By the time Brenda and them got through with their added accessories to it, it had to be brought from the factory and arrived the very last day. And I had to go up to Baltimore to pick it up and bring it back. Got to Africa after Brenda had that Newark experience of getting on the wrong airplane. We get to Africa, and we are in this isolated house because Brenda's job is to be a safe housekeeper for this very valuable volunteer. It was to be his safety net. If anything went awry, if he became suspicious about anything, all he had to do was get to that house. That was his house. It does not mean that Brenda was his woman. That was his house. But he volunteered because he was a gamer. He liked the gamemanship of playing off 2 different intelligence services. So he came out 4 times. None of those 4 times was he racing away from somebody, but she didn't know it when he suddenly showed up. She didn't know if right on his heels would be a bunch of other bad guys with guns and spears and that kind of thing. And it's sort of going to be up to her to look after it. And he went out, I think, knowing that he could expect that in Brenda, this woman that was going to look after him. We had a little special room they built in the house. The security came out and they made that house that we lived in on the edge of the bush like a jail. You get in and you shut the door and you were locked up. And from the outside you almost can't get in, although we had burglars try one thing. 30 kilometers out to the international airport, 30 kilometers into the capital. The first day I had an embassy car. I drove in, leaving Brenda behind, and she selected a staff from the members of a Bassa village that we were right beside of. She hired a cook, she hired a steward, she hired 2 stewards, she hired a gardener, she hired some guards, and as she was leaving, she had her full crew now. She was going to go into the house and give them their briefing. And we had been, by this time, 4 years in Asia. And she was used to handling cooks and maids and that information. This was a different lot coming from that Bassa village. But as she's walking away with her selected few, one of the men, and this is Brenda's way she described it, she said, this one guy called out and said, Missy, I see you didn't hire a driver. I said, you're going to get a car and you're going to want to carry the kids into school sometime, or you want to go get some bread? I'm the best driver in the village. Anybody will tell you that. Just say, John, go get some bread. I'll go get some bread. And Brenda said, you know what, John? You're exactly right. I haven't got a driver. So she hired John on the spot, $10 a week. I came in, he was the dumbest person I had ever met. You have to understand, I've dealt with the underside of humanity most of my life. I had never met the likes of John before, and there was no way he was going to drive that brand new Pontiac coming. They came about 10 days after we got there. Now, you might remember if you were here the first day, I talked about the love that showed on the face of this boy in the orphanage when he saw Brenda came in. That same amount of expression was on John's face of astonishment when that Pontiac came driving into the yard. And it was his car. And one of the first things he did, Brenda said, he got all the rocks out of the treads and the tires, dusted that thing off. And no way he was going to drive it. But a week or so after the car was there, I was sleeping. It was Sunday afternoon, and John came in and woke me up. Sam, the cook, was right behind me. He said, Boss Ben, Missy hired me to be the driver, but I've noticed you haven't asked me to do a lot of driving, and I'd like to get on with it. I think he had a date that night down in the village, and he wanted a car. So I said, I'll tell you what I'll do, John. I'm going to take you out and give you a check ride. So we went outside, and I got the car pointed, and we had this big wall around the outside, then we had a road around the house, and we had the house. So we were going to ride this road around the house, and I got it so we were straight in front of the house. And I said, John, I'm going to put it in drive. That's the D, you see the D? And I want you to hold on, I'm going to get out, you can get in, I want you to hold on to the steering wheel, and just in D, we're going to be going about 2 or 3 miles an hour. I want you to drive around the house. And John said, okay. So I slipped over, and John slipped right inside of it with thigh to thigh. He's sweating. I knew right then, this This was not a good situation. So we go by 2 miles an hour, and John's on the road, off the road. He's on the grass, he's in the bushes. 2 miles an hour. And going now down the side of the house, it's sort of going down the hill. He's picking up speed. We're going 8, 9, 10 miles an hour on the grass, into the bush, on the grass. And we start in the back. And I say, John, this is not working out. Put your foot on the brake. Let's stop this thing. So he lifted his big right foot up and slammed down on the accelerator. Yes. That car has less than 300 miles. And we are in Africa. And it is upside down. Nim happened to see the whole thing play out in the back. She called for Brenda. Brenda went outside and tried to get us up. So Brenda was looking after the house. She was settling in. Brenda's a very forward-leaning lady. But if you think about it, think about putting yourself, you ladies, into that situation. On the edge of the bush, next to a sort of a hostile village. One of the reasons they selected this house, because the Bassa don't have a lot of social skills. And they would steal you for your belt buckle. They would kill you for your belt buckle. But she was settling in, and she was doing okay, and she was reaching Brenda's, good disposition, and things were good, and good meals for me when it came in. I went in and started one of the 3 jobs that I told you the CIA case officer does overseas. 3 jobs. 1, maintain my cover. So once I got into the embassy, I met everybody, got cards made, met people in the diplomatic circle, told them who I was. I had a telephone number, I had an office in the embassy, and that's who I was. Second job, I went about spotting, assessing, developing foreign nationals that we had, my predecessor had an interest in, and following up on his contacts. And then I also had some assets that I picked up who were recruited. The problem was getting from the house in the morning into the embassy, which was 30 kilometers away. From our house back to the airport, it was all jungle. From our house into the embassy, there were villages and there were huts and shops, markets down close to the road. And I mean close to the road. And not only that, sometimes there'd be dogs out there in the warm asphalt keeping warm. And people would just suddenly be walking across. And you could not predict their movement. Sometimes people would be walking across and be looking at you as they're walking across, expecting you to stop. And it would happen every 3 or 4 days. You'd slam on brakes and go sideways up to somebody, and they always had the most indignant look. What are you doing? But this was their country. It was their road. If there was an incident, it was my fault. And that's simply the way it was. Not fair, that's the way it was. So going in to work in the morning was like going on a combat patrol. And coming back in the afternoon was equally bad because the sun, it wasn't in my eyes, I think it was in their eyes. But we were sort of blind. You're going down this blind alley. And people and dogs and cats and tigers and elephants and all that. None of that. We'd be crossing back and forth. Now, my job as a CIA guy, especially with handling agents, happened at night. So what would happen is I'd have to fight my way all the way home, get a bite to eat, wait for the sun to come out, fight my way all the way back into town again, do my business, fight my way all the way back out to the house. And that last trip was probably the most dangerous because, as I was saying, the cows and dogs like the heat from the asphalt, so they'd be out in the middle of the road, so it was going like that all the way down the road. So I tried first staying in the embassy. Everybody would go home, and there would be Jimmy Parker up in his office, in his cover office, waiting for the sun to come down. But it was pretty obvious that I was just killing time, and we had the char force, and we had to be careful that the char force would find out who we were. So that didn't work. I tried going to the Marine room, and that didn't work because after a while I set a pattern. But I found downtown a restaurant bar that had some rooms above, run by a Lebanese family, and it's named the El Maison. And you could go in the back of that restaurant, back at the bar, get your Herald Tribune, work your crossword puzzle. They only had beer lights in the beer signs. Get under one of those lights and disappear for an hour. It's great, absolutely great. Until I found out that it was the place for John Sherman. John Sherman was the Deputy Minister of Commerce in this country that had price fixing to keep down inflation. If you were a businessman and you were selling tires and the price of rubber had gone up internationally and you wanted to raise the price of your tires to meet costs, you had to go to the Minister of Commerce and put in a petition. And it had to be reviewed, and you were called before a panel, and sometimes there'd be investigations, and you had to really get an advocate there to fight for the Ministry of Commerce. And it went for a final review. This is just to raise the price of one tire, to the Minister of Commerce to sign off. That was the law. That was the way it was. Unless you went to the Il Maison some night and saw the Assistant Minister of Commerce, this guy we're calling John Sherman, and talked with him, maybe some money would pass hands, and you'd go in the next morning and pick up your paper. It sounds like it's graft, and it was, but it worked. The system worked. But this was John's place. And John Sherman coming into that bar in the back of the Il Maison at night, it was like Herb from Cheers. Hey, John! Hey, John! And John was a character. He was sort of a local hero. A young guy, he had managed to get this very important position in the government. He had been to school, graduated from college in the United States. They said he was a pro soccer player. They said he was great in the guitar. I don't know. But I do know he was a rock on tour. And I do know that he saw life different from y'all, and he didn't go through the same filters in seeing things that we saw. And I would love to talk to John Sherman. After we found each other, would occupy the same spot on God's good earth there for an hour or so a night. And a real friendship developed. It was a brotherhood. We were brothers from a different mother. And we would have supper together. In telling the story before, I said that John and I would have supper 2 or 3 times a night. We did for 8 or 9 months. I reckon it probably wasn't that much. But one night a week, twice, John and I would have supper at the back of the Il Maison. They saved the front of the Il Maison restaurant for regular customers because they had more light from the street light outside. In the back, you could sort of sit in the shadows. And Lebanese and other businessmen would come by John periodically, and they would go off to talk. And I never questioned him about it. And he never explained what they talked about off to the side, although the conventional wisdom was pretty clear about what was going on. It was just business in this country. We had some great conversations. I could spend the next hour talking about my conversations with John Sherman. But I love the man, and he was like a brother. And he didn't live that far from us, and he would just show up at our house. And Brenda would bring out another plate, and John would sit down and have supper with us. And he had such clout, he had such cachet with all the help. John Sherman would show up and then show him in the house. He came by a couple of times and got all the liquor because he was having some function, but it was all right. He'd go and show him where he was, helped him probably carry it out to his car. John Sherman. But after about a year, John told me, he said, if I got the Ministry of Commerce position for 1 year and held it for 1 year, I'd be rich for life. He said, I would have the open drawer policy as Minister of Commerce. Somebody would want to come in and want to change the price of something. I'd pull out that drawer. And when enough money had fallen in, I'd shut the drawer. I wouldn't have to see it work. There's no graft involved. The man wanted to put some money in there. That's up to him. If he forgets to pick it up when he leaves, that's all right. There's no graft. I'm not asking that guy for anything. But he said, I've got the first 2 or 3 guys in mind to sort of understand what's going on. And after about a year, John was appointed the Minister of Commerce. And we didn't see him that much thereafter. Brenda and I were invited, after he was Minister of Commerce, to the christening of his daughter. And we were the only white people there at his house. Maybe I saw him once or twice after that personally, and we talked. But we picked up. There was no getting to know each other. We just picked up where we left off. But he was seen more and more in the presence of the president. And there were rumors that John was sort of next in line to be president of this country. But he was very popular, and there were no negatives about John, and more and more of those pictures. Brenda and I left Liberia after 2 years, and I didn't say goodbye to John. I tried to get a hold of him, something was going on. I think his wife finally called Brenda, and she said, John's trying to get up with Jim, and he wants to say goodbye, but we never said goodbye. We went on our way. And we got back to the States, and there was a coup in that country. And they arrested all the corrupt politicians, including John. They took him out and shot him. Eddie, the friend that Brenda had looked after so well for 2 years, they found him out once he got back to his country. They took him out and shot him. That's part of the business of how did we get this far down? There's John. There's our friend John. Another posting that we had to get, so I want to get the clandestine core and some of our experiences out of the way. We were up in a part of Southeast Asia that was sort of a choke point to the drug trafficking. Opium was grown up in the Shan state of Burma and was brought down to what they call the Golden Triangle and processed into heroin there. Precursor chemicals came up from the coast, and the heroin went out 1,000 different ways to markets in Europe and the United States. So the thought was that we could knock it out at that choke point, that we would do mankind a service, and the price of heroin would go up, since this was the main process for it. The problem was that it was, we were one of the few round eyes, one of the few Westerners in this small town, which was close to the choke point. So we teamed up with other Westerners there. But then there's Nee, who was from Singapore, and there is Noi on the left. But anyway, every Friday night we'd party. It was, it was pretty regular in our life there. We were busy during the week. A lot of these were involved in tobacco in this area. Some of them were Rhodesian, some of them were Brits, but they grew a core tobacco. And we were, what you're seeing there is about the majority of the Westerners in this little town where we were in. But every Friday night we partied. One time we were tired, we didn't want to go, so we said, I didn't go. They came to our house and got on our bed, this group, and took us out to the party. And there were all kinds of parties. This was a hat party we went to. I think it was a change of gender. That would be Brenda on the right, and that handsome, that good-looking brunette there in the back is me. But the work was, it was CIA work. The caravans coming down to the Shan state of Burma would show up on satellite, so we knew when the dope was coming down. And there was also pretty easy, most anybody could go out and find out when the precursor chemicals were coming up from the coast. So our job was to try and locate those refineries. They had to be by water. There were a couple of things that they needed. They needed some way to get those chemicals into them. So once we found them, we tried to knock them out. And we had our resources to knock them out. And after one very successful operation, that is LEC, and LEC was one of my office assistants. You can see my map of North Carolina in the back. We busted about 11 refineries in one operation, and it made the world a little better place because of all that dope. Some of it I have here on the desk, but not nearly as much as we took. It was we made a major impact in the drug business. Now, as ironic as it would be, one of the old Chiang Kai-shek's Kuomintang generals was in charge of security. He lived right across the street from us in this little town. So what the druggers did that got busted, that lost all of their stuff, you know where that stuff went? Went down our toilet in the consulate. What they did is they blew up the general's house, and we lived right across the street. We blew out every window in our house, blew off every door in our house, so we sort of got the message. And there weren't so many happy parties after that. Especially, there's history to this. There was the wife of the DEA officer that was killed a couple of years before we got there. So the joy was gone from that assignment, and we moved into a hotel. here was another assignment I had in Southeast Asia. And you see those three characters? There is one that's notorious. Who is the notorious guy in that photo? Is it the guy kneeling? You know, you guys, I mean, there's almost more people here that know I'm CIA than most any place else in the world. So he's not, the guy kneeling is not the guy. How about the guy standing to the right? That's my communicator. He didn't know whether he was a foot or horseback most of the time. How about the guy on the left? What's his name? Joe Nicholson. And looking back, after he was arrested for being a Soviet spy, we look back at some photos. And this was a photo taken at a party. This was before he had been recruited by the Soviets. But it showed his intention. And just like Eddie, he was in it for the game. So is their book on me with the Soviets? Yeah. Brenda, who broke her leg, who had a stroke in 2010, operation, you know, on the Snoopy, the dustpan, the guy who's got a black cloud over his head. Brenda has something like that, but it has to do with health. We were at another place, and she had a grand mal stroke, seizures, grand mal seizure. We're in bed. They couldn't diagnose what this problem was while she was getting so faint. And it was on a Saturday night, and she froze like a board. And in freezing, she bit her tongue, so she was spouting out blood. But to the agency's great credit, they sent a doctor in. The doctor was at her side, an agency doctor, within, I don't know, 30 hours. And they sent in a plane, and they brought her all the way back to Washington. So Brenda has always been a big fan of CIA and the way it treats its employees. But after the first-class VIP treatment she was given for that seizure, she had ingested some bugs somewhere in Africa or when we were out on the economy in Thailand, cysticercosis, and they had migrated to her brain and caused the seizure. But another reason why, if you talk to my wife and ask her about the agency, for her, we can do no wrong. And in this instance, they were right there. This is, I said of all the directors I liked the best was Bill Casey. I'm talking to him there. Off to the right is a guy named Chauvelet. Who is Chauvelet? Eric?
You got me, sir.
He's Prime Minister of Thailand.
Okay.
So you can see, I'm putting my back to the Prime Minister of Thailand to talk with Casey. Casey had this phenomenal memory. You wouldn't see him for months, and you'd see him again, and he'd say, "Jim, how's Brenda? How's the kids?" But he had that touch. He had gifts when it comes to endearing himself to people. And that pretty much, remember I said storyteller? That's about the fishmonger. And I said early on I was a spy, and I told you about being a spy. I'm going to talk a little bit for the next 2 days about the war in Southeast Asia. I think the speech advertised today is supposed to be on the evacuation from Vietnam, but I'm so far behind, even now. We have an hour and a half today, if that's okay with you. If it's not, if you've got other plans, please excuse yourself. So I want to talk today about the secret war in Laos, give you some background on it, and then explain a little bit about what I did in the secret war in Laos. If you have been following my remarks at all, you will have noticed what a fan I am of Royal Caribbean and the effort they make to give value to its passengers, to its, you're more than customers to it, you are their lifeblood. And they go to great lengths to give value to it. And they gave you an extra 30 minutes today, and I think tomorrow. And they've given us the opportunity to talk about the CIA and sort of demystify it, to put a human face on it. We're going to sell some of my last book, The Vietnam War, its own sell, after the session today. I think Nikki is going to set up a table here. We only have 20 to sell, but at the $40. And I'm sorry for the price, but Brenda needs a new pair of shoes. So if you're part of the 20, and if there are 20 people that want, if you want to buy a book later on. I have, or Eric has, calling cards. Pick up a calling card, email me, and we'll make arrangements, and I'll send you something that has the Royal Caribbean Brilliance of the Sea fingerprints on it, as I will sign it for you. So that's after the session today. Only 20 copies to sell, but I'll be glad to sign them for you. The war in Indochina, the war in the Far East after World War II, 25 June 1950, 100,000 North Koreans on orders from Stalin pushed south. Got stopped at the Pusan Peninsula. MacArthur came in with the invasion in Incheon, helped enormously by Hans Toffel, who I told you is one of my heroes. Launched in at Incheon, cut across over to Seoul, cut off most of the still surviving North Koreans in the south. And the war was over. He went north on bad intelligence and was attacked by the Red Chinese in the northern part of North Korea. Interestingly, before 25 June 1950, Mao Zedong took over China in 1949. In October 1949, he declared himself the boss man, the head dog of Red China, Mao Zedong. In December, 2 months later, he went to Moscow for 2 months for a conference with Stalin, in which Ho Chi Minh also attended. They sort of plotted out in that December-January time period a roadmap ahead. Not included were Stalin's private plans to send his minions. Kim Il-sung was actually a Russian who was the first premier of North Korea. Stalin, when he brought in Ho Chi Minh and he brought in Mao Zedong, he was already probably committed to sending his armies down to take all the Korean peninsula. But probably then in 1950, he was planning on helping Ho Chi Minh. And what he told Mao Zedong in that December meeting, he said, I want you to help Ho Chi Minh in the revolution, getting the independence from the French. Give them weapons and give them grenades and give them whatever help they need, and I'll replace it in kind. And Ho said, you the man, that's good. So we'll carry the fight to the French. So after the peace talk in 53 in Korea, in 54 there was a battle for
Dien Bien Phu.
Dien Bien Phu. Battle for Dien Bien Phu. The French lost. The French retired the war. They'd been in war in the Second World War. They'd been in war in the late 40s and early 50s, and they were losing tens of thousands of people. The Viet Cong had the initiative. They were just reacting more or less then. They were changing commanders every year as if the commander could change, but there was no heart in their fight anymore. In 54, they lost at Dien Bien Phu. The government in Paris withdrew. A new government came in. The very first day, they gave Vietnam back to the Vietnamese. They had a conference in Geneva in 54, the Geneva Accords in 64. And they said, wait a minute, Geneva Accord in 54. They said, wait a minute, let's not be so hasty here. Let's lay out a way ahead. Eisenhower was our president, and what was established at the Geneva Accord of 54 is that Vietnam would be divided in the 17th parallel. North Vietnam under the command of Ho Chi Minh, South Vietnam under the control of some leader to be designated later. As it turned out, it was him. And everybody was sort of okay with that. They wanted to have elections in 57, 3 years later. And the Americans and also the South Vietnamese says, no, we can't do that. Number one, majority of the people live in North Vietnam. So they got them outnumbered there. And number two is they couldn't develop a government. They couldn't come together as a nation in 3 years. So the United States did not sign the Geneva Accord of 54. But Eisenhower liked it. And he liked it because you see Laos runs here. That's Laos. Eisenhower, the supreme commander in World War II in Europe, who has a good eye for strategy and the battlefield, said if we deny Laos to the North Vietnamese, the only way they'll have to attack South Vietnam is across the 22-mile 17th parallel. So he was all in favor of the separation of DMZ at the 17th parallel. He was all in favor of making Laos a neutral country. He was not in favor of the elections. And it went forward from there. And he sent in a strong CIA team that included, among other people, my hero, Stu Metford. Now, to put, is that in focus? Now, Dien Bien Phu was up here. This is where the French lost, in the area right in there. In 1960, a guy named Cong Lee, who was part of this neutral Laos, he claimed to be a neutralist. He didn't like the communist fight against the Western-supported Nusavan in Savannah Cat. He captured Dien Bien, and a battle ensued. Nusavan came up with artillery, and they fought for Dien Bien in 1960. This was Eisenhower's last month in office, and it was timed. The Soviets were behind Cong Lee. He was not able to hold Dien Bien. The forces from the Savannah Cat pushed him to the PDJ. That's a picture of the PDJ.
Plain of Jars.
It's halfway between Hanoi, downtown Hanoi, and Dien Bien. It is 200 miles, the Plain of Jars, and that's where Cong Lee went. And they were being resupplied by Russian aircraft, and Eisenhower is just beside himself. All of his efforts to make Laos neutral, his whole idea about preserving peace and stopping communist aggression in Southeast Asia was about to be toppled with this new Democrat coming in, Kennedy. And he was unsure about what to do. When Stu Metford, my hero, met Vang Pao, a Hmong general, and Vang Pao had the white Hmong, and they controlled the area around the PDJ, the Plains of Jars, that area that's only 200 miles from downtown Hanoi. There's a picture of Cong Lee. Bill Laird went over in 1951 to Thailand, about the time Eisenhower was being kicked out of Korea. And his job was to put together a special Thai military force from the Thai police. And they were called PARU, P-A-R-U. And their job was, in case the communists come across the border, Thailand at the time was surrounded by communist countries. Every country around, or Laos, which was neutral, but not very strongly, wasn't a very strong country. So he put together the PARU, and their job was to go anywhere and do anything as it pertained to the Thai border. Well, Bill Laird took some of his people up. When Nusavan came and retook Dien Bien, he went up after Stu Metford and met with Vang Pao and said, Vang Pao, would you be interested in fighting those Soviets that are down in the PDJ? And Vang Pao said, you give me some guns, and I'll give you the men, and we'll fight those son of bitches. And we did. It was one of the last acts of Eisenhower in early January or late December 1960, early January 1961, when Eisenhower gave the authority to the CIA to work with the local forces in Laos against communist aggression. And that was what turned out to be the secret war. And he let the CIA do it because we had established contact with Vang Pao. The military was in with the White Star, but it was not very successful. They didn't have the cachet with the locals that we did. In fact, the White Star was asked out, and the CIA came in to work with Vang Pao. And we trained his tribesmen with the PARU in how to fire weapons. Interesting, too, we set up M1s and carbines. Which weapons do you think the little Hmong wanted? Carbine, right? No. They wanted the big guns. They wanted the M1s. So we had to go back and get more M1s. But they proved to be very tenacious. They proved to be good guerrillas. They didn't hold ground, but they would shoot the communists from the rear and run and hide and lived to fight another day. It is interesting that on January 1961, the day before Kennedy is inaugurated as president, he met with Eisenhower in the White House, and for a briefing on Laos. What's going on with Laos? What's going on with Southeast Asia? But if you'll check your history books, not that there's much written about that meeting, but Kennedy arrived with McNamara and Clark Clifford, and Eisenhower had his old staff. And Eisenhower said, my ideas about Southeast Asia is to deny Laos to the communists. And you can reserve you can make a South Vietnam. You can make it, although their brothers to the north are aggressive and want to kill it. But protect the neutrality of Laos. Now, Eisenhower said that as a soldier. Kennedy, we assume, heard it as a politician. McNamara, I have no idea. Later on, we found a memo was found that McNamara wrote of that conference, and it was like he wasn't there. Clark Clifford wrote something, and who was the Secretary of State? Dean Rusk also wrote up something. And what they said was about the same. McNamara, I don't know, but he later told somebody sketching his life that he left that meeting completely confused. He said things were completely screwed up. And he said it was 6 months before he figured out ways to work. But by all accounts, McNamara went from $114,000 or $125,000 president of Ford Motor Company to his job as Secretary of Defense and made $25,000. But he did it because he wanted to make an influence. But he had no background in the military. He had been in the Second World War, but he had no head for strategy. And nothing that he did in the course of being Secretary of Defense shows any reflection of the advice and what Eisenhower had to say at this 19 January meeting. But there again, there is Laos, and you can again see the 17th parallel. Deny Laos, and really the North Vietnamese only have that 22-mile DNZ to come across to attack. We, on the other hand, in 1961, Kennedy, in pursuit of neutral Laos, sent Averell Harriman and Averell's deputy, William Sullivan, to Geneva to make an agreement with the Soviets. Why they were going to the Soviet Union was because Harriman convinced Kennedy that he had cachet and he could hold sway, and the Soviets wanted to deny Laos to the North Vietnamese that they could get it done. So they went and they signed the Geneva Accord of 1962, and it was to take this area of Laos. You see the area of Laos here? See where North Vietnam is there? And this is what resulted. It was the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And it came as a result of the agreement that Harriman and Sullivan struck with the Soviets, that there would be no troops inside of Laos. And they defended that by saying, well, we don't have any troops. We've got a lot of logistics people. But they set up this trail. It took 6 months. In 1961, it took 6 months to go from Hanoi all the way down to the Saigon area in the mountains of Laos. After the Ho Chi Minh was constructed, you could do it in a matter of days, and it was a 6-lane highway in parts. Our support to the Hmong up in Laos, around the PDJ, was very secret. It became a secret war, and there's a bigot list of people, because there were people against the war, including maybe in the Kennedy administration. So we sort of kept it to ourselves. We used old aircraft. That's an old T-34 helicopter. That's a C-46, I think. We used what aircraft were available. The CIA then had the responsibility of dealing with these Hmong and giving them weapons training them and getting them supply, where did they go to get people to work with the Hmong? Did they go to the military? Just like with the Glomar Explorer, when they went down and got Cajun shrimpers to be crew on the Glomar Explorer. The Laos program, they went and got smoke jumpers out of Montana. My boss was a guy named Hogg. He was a former smoke jumper. Shep, I won't go into some detail with Shep, a former smoke jumper, but they were great. They worked with the Hmong, they were comfortable with the high altitudes, they knew how to deliver stuff, and they melded in with the Hmong. They didn't keep themselves separate. Well, that was another Bill Laird trick. He didn't assign people to a two-man position on a mountaintop. One American would be out because he wanted them to commingle and learn the language and deal with the Hmong. But eventually we got the Hueys, and that became the workhorse in moving Hmong from hilltop to hilltop to defend this part of God's good earth, to keep the North Vietnamese from the Plain of Jars, because if they controlled the Plain of Jars, they could, the area of influence would be Dien Chin and Nong Pradhan. We also got the porters. I spent hundreds of hours in those porters, those sickening porters. Now, the Hmong that we were working with had not seen the internal combustion engine. They had not seen electricity. Of course, had not seen movies. They had not flown an airplane. Did they get sick a lot? You betcha. Did they belch out this stuff? And they brought their pigs with them when we were carrying them here and there. There was some atrocious smelling stuff. But that's the porter. And a lot of good friends with the Air American. That's a 130 that we got for the ramp. Not all landings were safe, though. We had our share of problems. That's looks like a 123 that had a sort of a sharp landing. It came to a abrupt stop. This was Long Chin. This is where I spent almost 2 years. The ridge line to the right is called Skyline. The runway down the middle was called the most secret place on the earth. But it could take pretty big aircraft. Only they had to pull the throttle all the way back to their belly because there's a karst here. We've got that clear at the bottom. That's the airfield. That's where I spent 2 years. This is my boss, Hogg, the ex-smoke jumper. This was my roommate, Kayak. We only had about a dozen guys that worked with the Hmong and with Air America. The CIA presence was very small. So if you look at me and say that I had a privileged position, you're exactly right. The slots came for Long Chin were few and far between. Years would go before a slot was open. And I happened to slip in when all of the intense fighting came to Campaign Z. Hogg was a good guy. He had no military. Working for Hogg was like he was the trail boss. But there was never, ever any confusion. You know, put your troops over here. You know, you get some support over there. Let's get it done by tomorrow night. Okay? And you'd go out and do it. But nothing like military orders. There was nothing written down. We had to deal with Air America, us young paramilitary bucks. Air America was sort of a sobering element to war, the fight in the secret war in Laos, because they did not like phonies, and they did not like anybody who fudged on the truth. The Air America guys had been there for a long time. They were professional risk takers. Those planes, those helicopters they flew, those quarters, they were not armed. They went into these different sites on the edge of the battlefield, sometimes in the middle of the battlefield, by what they learned from the case officer, from the guy on the ground, but they would make their judgment about when to go in and how to do that. So when Hogg would give us instructions, Kayak, myself, Digger, Ringo, Bamboo, Moose, we all had call sign, and my call sign was Mule. I don't understand with my New York diction, where they call me the Mule, but that was it. But the greatest group of guys I've ever worked with. You can't imagine the Air America guys. You might see one or two in your lifetime. These really adventurous, patriotic risk takers that flew those planes. And then the Air Force would send in Ravens The Ravens flew these unarmed planes that were spotters for fast movers because we needed support on the ground. But the fast movers came in to give us support. We're moving so fast, they had no contacts on the ground. How were they going to know where to bomb? Well, the Ravens, they were there. I would be out with my troops on the other side of the skyline, and I'd suddenly get a call from H. Ormsby or from Fred, and they would say, give me a target. I've got some fast movers coming in. And you'd give them, well, my patrol said there were some bad guys here. And they would dive down to try and draw fire so they would have a target for the fast movers coming in. But that group, we had about 5 tribes in Longchin. But we all got along. It was all risky work. We loved the Hmong. The Hmong that I worked with, totally emerged in. I love the Ravens. Air America guys are still some friends. We just saw John Greenway last week. John's 90 in a heli, and I'd still go to war with him. But you had to be careful with John Greenway. He didn't have any brakes. You know, he didn't have any. Where other people had good judgments and hold on a minute, John Greenway wouldn't. He'd just go do it. Frenchie Smith, George Taylor, and a great group of guys, and Shep Johnson. Shep Johnson recently died. Shep Johnson was, I have to be careful in explaining Shep Johnson to you that you don't leave with the wrong impression. This was the valley, the Longchin Valley. This was the end of the valley, the route. And this was where we lived. That was where Kayak and I had a room. This was the pad where planes came to park. That was Shep's rigging shed. Air Ops is over here. Our headquarters is there. The mess hall is right there. We would be down on the ramp in the morning when the sun came up, and we would get an Air America pilots that flew in to work for us that day as we serviced for that trip. Dick Johnson, our boss, wouldn't let us, our big boss, wouldn't let us overnight with our troops, which was good. We didn't argue with him too much about that. But we would come in each night. Air America would make sure that they brought us in. Occasionally they missed. One time they missed with a good friend named Pon, and his position was overrun, and he was killed. But this is Shep's rigging shed. Now, with the U.S. Army, if they went in to run a war working with the Hmong, how many people are they going to put in supply? You put in a lot, right? Logistics, and then the people that bring it off the planes, and to sort it out. And if you were in the field, how are you going to get your supplies? Or you're going to have to go through a requisition of some kind and go through the company supply officer and then back to our headquarters and then over here and over there. The way it worked with Shep, he would call down to Air Ops, Jerry Connors, say, Connors, we need some more meat, we need some more food, we need some more grenades, we need some more. And Connors would get on the telephone and call down to logistics. They would come up at 1:30 and Shep would have his people put it out behind the rigging shed. And then he would get orders in. Shep would get orders in from the field. And he had everything on a clipboard. And they would need, sometime it was urgent and to go to the top. And he had to rig that thing right. If it had to be dropped, he had to put the right kind of parachute. If it was going to be dropped high, it was a different parachute from dropping low. And they kept changing planes on it. It might be a twin otter, and then it got some mechanical problems and it was down. And suddenly he's got 2 helicopters. Well, he's got to re-rig everything. Shep did it all himself. The whole Hmong army we had was supplied by one guy. And that was maybe our main job, was to make sure they had the bullets and they had the food to keep going. There was never a complaint. 2 years that I was there, nobody ever complained about it. Well, except for the PDJ ones. But they never complained about running out of guns, running out of ammunition, running out of grenades, running out of food. Shep would be there in the morning. We would get there before the sun would come up on the route. Shep would be out there, and he would work all day long. And he would be the last guy off the route. Maybe I saw him a time or two leaving the route. I never was up so early that I saw Shep going to the route, but it worked. He would work 16 hours a day, Shep Johnson. That guy back wherever. That guy, Shep Johnson. But the thing that people remember Shep about, not his enormous competence, not his enormous gift for organization, and getting things done without problems. And it changed all the time. He would have things set up for an emergency drop, and then what plane he was expected to use is no longer available. And he's got to change everything. Never complained. Never complained. But Shep would come in at night, tired as he was, drink 2 beers and be as drunk as his goat. His wife was a good friend with my wife, Brenda. You can tell Brenda and I are attached at the hip still. Shep's wife, Jan, had a glass eye, and she had an attitude. She thought you were looking at that glass eye because most people were. I think she got it on sale at Walmart. I don't know, that glass eye. Right. And she was big and she was blocky. Brenda went one night and Jan, they were going to play bridge at Jan's house. Now, Brenda and Jan got along, but Brenda was along. I mean, she married me for So they're going to play bridge, but the air conditioner broke downstairs. So they have to play on the landing going upstairs. My job is to take Shep out. So I took him out. He had 3 beers, drunk as a skunk. He wants to go home, go to bed. Go home, go to bed. If you don't carry on right now, I won't. I ain't going home. So I took him home. I didn't go in because I knew Jan was going to be there. I did not know the card table was on the landing going upstairs. Shep came in and he just couldn't understand that the air conditioner was off and they were playing up there. He just couldn't understand why the girls were up there. So Jan said, Shep, you drunk some of it. Don't you come up these stairs. You lay down on that couch and die. I don't care. But don't you come up these stairs. And Shep came up the stairs halfway, and then he jumped up to the next lift of stairs, and he climbed over the banister, and he crawled the last few steps, and he went over there. And Jan said, aren't you son of a bitch? Don't you come out of that room. I'm telling you, Shep, I'll kill you if you come out of that room. And Shep came out pretty soon. And he had this sarong tied around him. And Jan said, you son of a gun. Boy, you are in such trouble. He walked a few steps down. He's going to retrace his steps, right? Forgetting the fact that he had on a sarong. He jumped over, got caught on the top, slid all the way down. This is a true story. Ask Brenda about it later on. They're saying, Brenda, don't turn around. Don't turn around. But she did. When Jan was calling him an asshole, that's what she saw. Another thing, but a Shep, the thing people remember that worked on the program is how effective, how impossibly effective he was. That he never complained. Never complained. And he did it all himself in that one clipboard. Bang Powell appreciated it. He was going to have a bossy for Shep. So our big boss, Hugh Tovar, said, now Shep, this is pretty important. Now, nobody else I know of has Bang Powell offered to have a bossy, which is a party. So I want you to do this right. This is a cross fellowship kind of thing. You and Jan go up and see my wife and do the planning necessary to make this a huge success. So Shep had to go down, they're still living in New Orleans, and get Jan, bring her up to Vientiane. And they went to Hugh Tovar. Hugh Tovar was one of those Easterns down in Ivy League, Harvard, or I don't know. He was to the manner born. He was a great guy, very smart, very mannered. His hair never got out of it. I never understood. He'd come out of the helicopter going full throttle. Hair never got messed up. Clean fingernails. Everybody else would be dirty, like a mud worker. And Hugh Tovar was clean. But anyway, so they go up. He's with Jan, and they go into the Tovar house. Hugh at the time was married to this French lady. And they sat down in the waiting room, waiting for Mrs. Tovar. Now, Shep thought he had to, excuse me, ladies, he thought he had to fart. So he did, but he had diarrhea. And he crapped his pants, and they were sitting on this white love seat. And he could feel it seeping through his pants. So he turned to Jan and told Jan, I just crapped in the britches. And she was turning around looking, but Mrs. Tovar came in. They had to stand up, and there. That was Shep. Boy, I love Shep. Everybody who knew Shep Johnson loved him. And the stories that go on and on. Almost any time Shep left the valley, there were stories to tell. But boy, was he good. But Hogg was good too. Hogg was, Brenda worried. He looked like a movie star, but he would stay up in the valley for months on end, would leave every once in a while, go